These are solutions to Math 252 quiz 10. Okay, number one, absolute value of a sub n plus 1 over a sub n is n plus 1 squared plus 2 over 3 to the n plus 1 divided by the original, which means multiplied by the reciprocal of the original, 3 to the n over n squared plus 2. These two combine to give me 1/3. This one just put together is n plus 1 squared plus 2 over n squared plus 2. As n approaches infinity, this approaches 1. The n plus 1 and n are practically the same, and that doesn't change much. So when you approach 1/3 as n approaches infinity, you could do L'Hopital's rule for this, but we're saving time with this here. So the series is absolutely convergent and therefore convergent by the ratio test. Number two, same thing, ratio test. Absolute value of a sub n plus 1 plus a sub n, x to the n plus 1 over n plus 1 squared times n squared over x to the n. So the n combination gives me this, n squared over n plus 1 squared. X to the n plus 1 divided by x to the n is x. And that approaches absolute value of x as n approaches infinity. Okay, that will converge if x is between -1 and 1. So the radius of convergence is 1. So at the moment, I have absolute convergence here, divergence here and here, and -1 and 1 we don't know. So we'll plug them in separately. When plugging x is -1 in the original, but -1 here, you have -1 to the n times -1 to the n. That's 1 to the n, or 1. Summation 1 over n squared. That's a convergent p series. P equals 2 greater than 1. So we have convergence at -1, closed circle. X equals +1. Summation -1 to the n over n squared. That converges by the alternating series test. It's alternating terms decrease in absolute value and approach 0. So color that in also. So the radius of convergence is 1. The interval of convergence is bracket -1, 1 bracket. Okay, x to the 4n over n factorial. Absolute value of a sub n plus 1 over a sub n. X to the 4 parentheses n plus 1 over n plus 1 factorial. Divided by the original means multiplied by n factorial over x to the 4n. And this divided by this is x to the 4n plus 4 minus 4n. Okay, so that's just going to be x to the 4th. And these two give me an n plus 1 in the bottom. And as n approaches infinity, that approaches 0, regardless of what x is. No matter what x is, it's fixed. N plus 1 will shoot past it. So the radius of convergence is infinity. Interval of convergence is -infinity to infinity, which is another way of saying all real numbers. Right, so that was quiz 10 for now.